Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week number 2. Every week, I will make a video like this and tell you about what's going on in the week, tell you a little bit about the science that's happening, give you an introduction to the week, and tell you some deadlines and some tips. So here we are at week number 2 in Science 200. And this is a picture, photograph that I took from a whale watching trip, and this is a lighthouse off of Gloucester, Massachusetts, when I went whale watching in 2019. It was so exciting. I was on a boat then, whale watching boat. Okay, so last week we took a look at the natural sciences, so chemistry, physics, biology, number 1, astronomy, geology, environmental science. And the question in the discussion was, which one is the one that you are most interested in? And then you also answer the question, is that particular natural science one that's associated with the topic that you have chosen? So that's going to be interesting to see. You took a look at how science works in chapter 1 in the Sumo web text. And I will say that usually it's a pretty simplified discussion about how science works. Develop a hypothesis, design experiments, do the experiments, write up the results, draw a conclusion, write up the results, get it published. Yeah, that is a simplified version, especially doing the experimentation and the things that you have to do beforehand before you can even develop a hypothesis of any type. You have to do a tremendous amount of background research. Read everything you can find on a particular topic so that you can ask a good question and design good experiments. So you have to know a lot about your subject before you do any experiments. And then when it comes to experimentation, you don't do an experiment once, you don't do it 3 times. You do it over and 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 over again until you're sure that the results that you're getting are a result of whatever is happening in your experiment. Coming to a conclusion, that's fairly easy because you should know all about what's going on by now. Getting published is difficult. You write up your work and then you send it into a journal that covers the same topic or the same set of topics as what you've done your research on. It is difficult to get published. I will tell you that. People scrutinize your work, and almost always your work is sent back and said, no, this will not be published. But usually it says, unless you make these changes. And so then you make the revisions, make the changes, send them back into the journal, and then you get your work published. And then it's out there for all of scientists to look at, critique, etc. And they do. People do. So revision is terribly important through the whole process. You even revise your hypothesis. You revise your experiments as you go along. So the process is more complicated than just a simple series of steps like you learn in the 7th grade. You also learned about Alexander Fleming and penicillin, which is an awesome topic. Of course, I'm a microbiologist. How can I not love this story? But Alexander Fleming was a microbiologist, and he came into work after a bit of time off, some vacation time, and he had to clean up the petri dishes, which is interesting because usually it's a graduate student that has to do that. How do I know that? After having worked in a lab for a long time. So he goes in to clean up the glass petri dishes, and he sees this mold growing on a petri dish that had bacteria on it, and there's a completely clear zone around where the mold is growing, and he figures out that mold must be producing a chemical that's killing off the bacteria around it. He called it penicillin after Penicillium notatum, which is the type of fungus that he had on the plate. And then the textbook goes into, then he stopped at that juncture in his research. He had discovered penicillin, and that's all he was going to do with it. His lab wasn't set up to grow all of this fungus and then isolate the chemical. He couldn't even do that. So it fell to other people to do that, to other scientists. And they did figure this out. And basically, they saved the lives of millions of people, especially men, in World War II. Because one of the things that kills soldiers and killed them for many millennia was infections. And the infections came from wounds, came from sickness because they didn't have enough food and they were not sheltered properly and all of that. There was so much stress on their bodies. And penicillin came along and saved a lot of lives. And then in the 1950s, it was available to the general public. So we have only had antibiotics that we could use since the 1950s. So that's an awesome topic, and it shows you how science works and how even if a discovery is made, then if we want to use it, we have to carry on into a different sort of realm like production. You chose your research topic, hopefully, from the ones that were listed, and if you did not, then you should have emailed me and we had a discussion about this to figure out what you can do instead. This week is all about chapter 2 in the textbook. Oh, by the way, that is dolphin strand feeding. They do this on purpose. They are hunting for fish. They school them up in a group and shoot them up toward the shoreline. The fish come out on the land and the dolphins get them and eat them. And I will be seeing them in just a few days. I'm very excited. So anyway, chapter 2 is the longest chapter in the whole textbook. I have to say that. And I also have to say that it wasn't a person like me who wrote this chapter. I'm just saying, it must have been a historian or I don't know, some English major or somebody. It wasn't a science person, that's for sure, because it is so long. But anyway, that's your main goal for this week is to go through chapter 2, learn about cholera. Cholera is a disease that produces something called rice water stool. It's just like white, milky looking stool after you've had horrible diarrhea. And basically it's just your body losing every bit of liquid in it. And that's what kills you, the dehydration. It is very dangerous. And so this whole chapter is about cholera and sanitation and how it is transmitted to people, how important clean water is. Don't get it out of a river that's had sewage dumped in it. You know, everybody knows that now. We didn't know it back then in the 1800s. Miasma was really big in the medical community, and miasma is just contaminated air filled with disease of some sort. And of course, there are airborne diseases, but not all diseases are airborne. But they thought that back then. They thought miasma, this bad air that people breathed in, was what was causing cholera. And in fact, we found out that it was their water supply that was contaminated and was making them sick. Public health began in England during this time, and public health is the saving of lives of the public by certain measures. For example, good sanitation, clean water, bathrooms, garbage pickup, rat control, all types of things like that. I worked in public health for 11 years. I loved every minute of it. It was awesome. But I do have some crazy stories, I'll tell you that one. Whew, crazy people, crazy stories. And you also learn about how, and you will talk more about how science works because looking at this particular topic. We started the discussion last week. We will continue through the whole term talking about how science works, how it's communicated, how it's published, what are good sources, scientific sources, and that sort of thing. We'll do that for this whole term. And then you will turn in a question that you have developed from your topic that you have chosen, whether it's GMOs. And most people who are interested in GMOs are interested because they think that they're bad for people and that they don't choose foods that are labeled as GMO, which no foods are labeled as GMOs. There are some that are labeled as non-GMO. But if you take a look at the statistics, more than 90% of all corn that's produced in this country is genetically modified. So if you eat any product that has ever touched a corn kernel, it is a GMO food. Now, we don't have very good standards for how foods are labeled in this country. They do over in Europe. They're more conscious of that. So there are all kinds of issues around GMOs and health and safety and that sort of thing. Electric vehicles, why are we producing them? Are they good for the environment? Genetic engineering, is it okay to change the genes in human beings? Is it not okay? What are the issues? What kinds of genes should we be looking at to change? Biodiversity conservation, why in the world is this important? Why do we care how many species are in an ecosystem? Why do we care if species go extinct? Oh goodness, what have I left out? Ocean acidification. Okay, big deal. The ocean is becoming a little more acidic. It is a big deal. It affects all of the life in the ocean. And why is it happening? Because we're putting too much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels. So anyway, you're going to develop a research question from the topic that you have chosen. You will do that this week and turn it in. Okay, and then the tip of the week, especially this week, break up your assignments into manageable pieces. You definitely want to do that with chapter 2 because it is a fairly long one. It is, like I said, it's the longest one in the textbook. And there are questions all along the way. So make sure you answer all those, but just break it up into manageable pieces. If you have 15 minutes, read one section of the chapter and answer the questions, and then go do the rest of whatever you have to do. Stop taking your break at work and go back to work. Go back to watching your TV show, whatever. Just break up your assignments into manageable pieces. Okay, I hope that you have a wonderful week this week. And if you need anything, please email me, m.sigmon@snhu.edu. M stands for Melody. That's my first name, so that's where the M comes from. But m.sigmon@snhu.edu. I will answer you as quickly as I can, always within 24 hours, sometimes within minutes. So please let me know if you need anything, if you have any questions. That's what I'm here for, to help you. Okay? Hope you have a wonderful week.